The planning board meeting of the 2nd of April, 2025. We'll start with roll call. Brian Falcon. Here. Jen Bluestein.
Here.
Alden Clark.
Here.
Charlie Palmisano. Here. Jamie Pennington.
Here.
Rick Tainter. Here. Jack Lacaire. Here. Matt Heffron. Here. It's a rare full house. In person. Congratulations to all of you. We have 3 public hearings on the agenda tonight. We're going to start with 570, 572.
And they have actually requested, this is late today, so kind of a new update for the planning board, but they had asked for a continuance until the next meeting, which is the 16th. And that's primarily because they have an adjustment they have on the plan for the Conservation Commission, which it's always better to have a consistent plan. So while there are a few other things that we were talking about and coordinating details on for the plan tweaks on their side and conditions, it just made more sense for them to continue and have everything in line. So they've asked for continuance to the 16th before we make a motion.
So I guess I'll ask for a motion to approve continuance.
I'll move that we continue all items for 570, 572 Merrimack Street to be continued to our next meeting, April 16th. Right?
Yeah.
Second.
Yeah. We can do this with hands tonight. All those in favor? Opposed? We move on to 3957 Merrimack.
Evening, Chairman Cooper. For the record, Nick Franklin, 13 Picard Street over Amesbury River. I'm here to represent Renee Bernard, who's here in the 3rd row, the black sweater. He's the owner of the property at unit 41, 43, or 45. He's at the corner of Green Street and Merrimack, shown on the screen on the left-hand building. Renee's been there for about 20 plus years, and he owns the vacant lot that's the subject of the public hearing tonight at 4957 Merrimack, the former Gibbs gas station. I've been working with Renee for more than, I think, 10 or 12 years, trying to get this project over the finish line. I think we've done 3 pre-application conferences in the last 6 to 7 years before the planning board. We've had a number of probably more personal challenges to get this where it needs to be, which is in front of you in a public hearing and in front of the other land use boards that are reviewing this project. So what I'm going to do tonight, I've got 2 other members of the design, really the members of the design team, Scott Brown from Scott Brown Architects. He's doing the architectural work of the project for the building design, and Steve Sawyer's here from Millennium Engineering. And I'll have them both present a few of the slides regarding the architectural elevations in the program, as well as the civil for the site plan. So just before that, we go to the next slide. That's the design team. Second slide, thanks, Andy. Next slide, please. I'm just going to give you an overview of sort of the goals, design goals for the project in the purpose slide, yep, and how we approach the design of this building over the last 10 years. We're in front of you folks for site plan approval and I believe 4 special permits, 1 for the mixed use in the building, number 2 for the additional height of the building. I think the building is 46 or 47 feet, which is only allowed with a special permit from the planning board. We're also seeking relief under the Intermodal Transportation Improvement Fund in the off-street parking requirements to have the commercial parking requirements for the ground floor use of the building to be located in probably the municipal parking garage, but we know those are not reserved spaces. We're seeking to utilize the fund and the special permit to meet our parking requirements. And then lastly, we have a special permit also before you, got it listed there under the Historic Commission. We went to the commission on the 27th of February for their advisory review of the DOD requirements, and I believe that's the 4th special permit that will ultimately be issued by the planning board. And we've also been on the 5th of March for our initial consultation with the Affordable Housing Trust. We are going back to the trust next Wednesday to continue that conversation about the inclusionary zoning requirements for the affordable units that would be in the project. So I'd like to just hop into the next slide to talk about our project goals. Clearly in our mind, that this is again a long-term objective of this project design. This is really about strengthening and continuing the revitalization of the Merrimack Street corridor. This project obviously is a big gaping hole on that side of the block between Titcomb and Green Streets. So we're really trying to recapture and reestablish the street wall that used to be here. And you'll see in the package, in the project narrative, as well as a few slides from now, there was a pretty strong street wall of buildings, not only on this site, but in that corridor previous to the urban renewal efforts that cleared this site in the 1960s to put in the gas station and the auto repair building that's still on site today. So it's again about reestablishing the street wall, activating the street with ground floor commercial uses, adding in pedestrian amenities that are pretty standard fare and typical in downtown Newburyport, period lighting, the seating, the brick sidewalks, the street trees, and obviously having a high quality building here that's mixed use. Next slide, please. So in looking at the design approach, we really have 4 basic steps: understanding the existing conditions on this property, looking at how this property in its existing state fits within its surrounding context of Renee's building next door at the corner of Green Street, looking at that wood frame building on the corner of Titcomb that was elevated probably in the 1980s to add that additional story on the ground floor, and obviously the former Bisco biscuit factory that was removed, the Lombardi garage with the vacant lot backing up onto Val Clifford's row house building there on Brown Square on Pleasant Street. So really getting a good understanding of how this fits within the block. Looking at the historic context and primarily its pre-urban renewal, what was on the site and how can we weave it back together in the fabric running really from Route 1 all the way into downtown Newburyport as a gateway, an arterial corridor into downtown Newburyport. And then really third, developing a conceptual building and site plan, bringing it in for pre-application review, and then refining that building and design plan and continuing to do so as we collaborate with staff, public comment, obviously the planning board and the other land use board committees that we are interfacing with in seeking these special permits. Next slide, please. So looking at the existing conditions, we have almost a half acre. It's about 18,000 square feet. There's about 180 feet of frontage on Merrimack Street. It's in the B2 district, so the zoning is relatively flexible for the dimensional density and land use entitlements for the property. The existing building on the site has obviously been vacant for several decades. It's used for some passive storage, but it was a former service station with auto repair. This was a gas station. The tanks were pulled quite a long time ago. And it's been used as a surface commercial parking lot for the last 5 to 10 years. Building was originally built in 1969, so it's not a historic structure by any means. And the unique features of the site are obviously, it's got this large gap tooth as you move down that Merrimack Street corridor. Yeah, the street wall is significantly broken with 180 feet of nothing. The existing building is about 62 feet setback. See it in the aerial image from the street edge. So it's kind of the opposite of the quality and character of the built environment in downtown Newburyport. This really represents the sort of post-war era being a gas station there. So it's clearly a blighted property with large gravel parking lot. It's a combination of gravel, crushed stone, and pavement. So it's unsightly as well as being open. And it's got a very wide curb cut. The sidewalk is essentially a bituminous pavement rather than even a concrete sidewalk. Streets. Okay, so you're all familiar with it. Let's look at the existing building and then the site. So again, the building's about 2,000 square feet, a single story, built in 1969. It's currently vacant. It's got some storage in it. It's not in great condition. It's not going to fall down tomorrow, but it's not high quality construction. It's not a non-contributing structure from a historic preservation standpoint. Again, this was part of the conversation we had back in February with the Historic Commission in review of the downtown overlay district. It's clearly got an adverse impact. The property, the building, the entire context on the surrounding property values and just the experience of walking that corridor. So we were approved for the demolition of that structure as part of this larger review of the DOD on the 27th of February. Next slide, please. So looking at the site, again, got about a half acre. It's relatively flat, but it's deceivingly got a 2-foot grade change from left to right or from west to east. The high point being the Tickham Street end. The site drops about 2 feet towards Renee's building, and it's on the corner of Green and Merrimack. There's no stormwater treatment on the site. The soils are very sandy, so there's a lot of infiltration on the site, but there is no stormwater treatment. And the zoning, as I said earlier, is pretty flexible in respect to the dimensional density and land uses permitted in the B2 district. Next slide, please. So looking just really from Route 1 to downtown, it's along that corridor, there's a mix of architectural styles from the early 19th century through really the 21st century. The building that I participated on with Scott Brown is in the lower right at the corner of Market Street. And the off-ramp from Route 1, that's obviously the 21st century, but you've got a pretty varied set of architectural styles, building placement, even land uses with mixed-use buildings, commercial parking garage, the civic use in the parking garage, standalone commercial buildings, and residential along that short corridor. So that's really the context we're trying to insert this building into, and given its relationship closer to Market Square and that end of the corridor, mixed use really seems like the appropriate land use for that building that we're proposing. Next slide, please. So again, looking back at the historic context, back in the mid-19th century, there were stick frame buildings here, and I think those buildings were there over that 100-year time frame before urban renewal. You can see them in the 1950 assessor's map. The multiple colors indicate the ground floor commercial uses along Merrimack Street, the yellow being multifamily uses, all contained within those 3 structures that sat on this property. That was all cleared probably in the 1960s to prepare for the gas station in the existing building. So there was a strong, well-defined street wall. Obviously, none of you were surprised to see that running right from Green Street through Tickham and all the way up to Route 1. Very walkable, very pedestrian oriented in respect to activity levels and what was happening on the street and how people were engaged from the sidewalk. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to go through the 10 main design goals, but because I've already covered some of them, but this is really an effort to adhere to traditional design principles similar to what we did down the street on Market Street at the end of that block. Really looking at being careful with the building placement, the massing, the scale, the material, and the design details, and really trying to embrace and enhance the quality and character of the existing historic buildings that we all cherish in downtown Newburyport. We're trying to activate the street again and promote some housing choice. We are proposing to have up to 16 units of residential land use above the ground floor. For 16 units, there would be they're relatively small in the proposal at about 1,000 square feet per unit. So there would be a requirement if there are 16 units here, which is how we've designed the project. There would be 2 affordable units out of the 16. So a combination of them, at least in this proposal, they're relatively small, and there is this affordability requirement. It really will be a mixed income, a different product in downtown Newburyport, if in fact there are that many units in the building. We are trying to obviously provide adequate parking and meet the parking requirements for those residential units. So we came up with 16 based on our ability to protect parking behind the building. Nobody wants to see it, but we have to meet the minimum parking requirements in at least the residential units. That's what we've done with the 25 spaces in the rear of the property. And lastly, I'd say putting those goals into smaller buckets, it's really about being sensitive to the streetscape improvements. Again, the wider brick sidewalks, the street trees, the period lighting, the seating, and all the texture and interest that comes with the streetscape along Merrimack Street and integrating this property more like Market Square than further out from the downtown. So we did look, next slide, at character defining features. It was an interesting inventory. We did this probably a year ago in trying to work out the design details of the building, and Scott can speak to this a little more when we look at the elevations, but we canvassed a lot of the downtown to really get a sense of storefront designs, the glazing patterns, the entrances, the signage, the openings, the windows, doors, balconies, terraces, the railings, the metal, the materials, the bricks, the mortar joints, all of that is really important to make this building, in our minds, successful and fit in, not trying to replicate what's here, but pay homage to the design details that really make Newburyport special. Next slide, please. So the real challenge for us was to incorporate some of these character defining elements of Newburyport, particularly the downtown, into the building and site design. So what we're presenting here in our application and tonight is essentially a 32,000 square foot, 4-story building. It's mixed use with about 2,500 square feet of ground floor commercial space. We do have that central entrance with the canopy defining the main entrance to the building. Again, the grade change moving from left to right presents challenges for what will ultimately be about 1,250 square feet, which is relatively small in commercial space on that ground floor, again, because we're accommodating the parking on the back of the building, which is penetrating the back of the building. You'll see that on the site plan. The commercial space here is not overly large. We haven't got an easy ability to incorporate entrances into those two spaces without centralizing it in the middle of the building because of the 1 foot grade change, either down on the right-hand side near Tidcombe or going up a foot to the first floor down on the Green Street end of the building. So that's what really drove that central entrance, and then the canopy coming out. We know we're going to need, if the canopy stays out over the sidewalk, we know we're going to need an easement from the city council to accommodate that. So if that wasn't granted for any reason, we'd have to pull that back or modify that design. We're aware of that. So we've got lots of design details that I think leave to Scott and Steve. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Steve to talk about civil plans. And then Scott can talk a little bit about, again, the program space with the floor plans and the building design. And then we can all sort of participate in our initial response to the peer review comments. We've also had feedback from staff in the couple of months that this has been out there. And more recently, some public comments that were uploaded that we're trying to respond to. We can begin to respond to that tonight with the understanding this is just the opening of the hearing, as Andy said. And it would be our intention to have a couple of weeks to respond to whatever questions we can answer, come back next month. So with that, I'm going to ask for the next slide and ask Steve to give us an overview of the site plan.
Good evening, Steve Sawyer with Millennium Engineering. Actually, one item regarding the peer review, I believe, Andy, we've actually run through the peer review process prior to the first meeting here. The peer review came back very quickly from the initial submission. We updated plans, resubmitted an updated set a week ago. And we did get a letter back, I believe, from Phil Christensen saying he was, all his comments were addressed. So that's good news. As far as the site, it's pretty straightforward. We have a 20-foot drive aisle, on the right side where we enter off of Merrimack Street for parking in the rear. We provide a full 24-foot back out with full compliant 9x18 spaces. A lot of times in urban settings that I've designed is they allow you to reduce it just to the fact that most of the people there, the residents, they understand where they're parking, they know how to negotiate it. So this is ample. We provided the full requirement typical for commercial applications, but these spaces will be designated for the residents. So you can see there's a good portion of them are underneath the podium style. You can see that dotted line that extends into the parking that is the building second story and the building above. There's 12 feet clear from the ground level to the underside of the building there. You can also see in the back, or on the back left corner, there is undercover bike parking located in the rear of the property. And then as far as on the streetscape, we're widening the sidewalk, I believe 8 feet at the bump out, 9 feet along the majority of the building. One item that doesn't show clearly on this slide is that it appears, with the entry, it looks as if it's pavement out to the street. That's on the site plan, the updated site plan, with comments from the city. It's a drive apron, so the brick sidewalk continues across the entry. So it's a continuous pedestrian pattern across the driveway. As far as stormwater, lighting, site lighting. So we have one light on the island. You can see those 4 spaces, and actually there's a second light that's not shown that is to the left of the dumpster and at the back of those parking spaces there. It's low level light, low level lighting just to provide some ambient light for the parking in the rear of the property. The dumpster has been moved slightly from this slide. It's slid up tight to the right to the property line. It allows a dump truck to pull in and empty the dumpster, leaving space for any cars that pass to the right of it coming in or to the left of it leaving. For a dump truck height typically range from 10 to 12 feet. So if it's a larger truck, the only manner to get to pull the trash would be if it's a front loader to pull in front and then back up, which is fairly common in urban situations, or back in and pull out. But one thing that could be arranged is to ensure that any of the dump trucks that trash trucks that would utilize or service this site would be under 12 feet. With that, they could pull in and negotiate and make a 3-point turn, and either they can come in forward and lead forward if the certain size truck was utilized for this that operation. As far as stormwater, actually, I'm not sure if the stormwater shown in the next slide. No, it's like, okay, you can go back to that first one. Okay, there we go. Let's see there. Site plan. Yeah, so as far as the stormwater, there's 2 small catch basins in the rear. You can see them behind it's centrally located inside the parking area. That's collected. This is just showing the grades, the surface features of it. I don't know if you can, Andy, if you can get the next
card sheet.
Yeah, no, just go back to that. Yeah, we don't have it in this slide deck, but so basically it's collected in deep sump catch basins. All the water is collected. There's 3 catch basins. There's 2 behind the building. And then there's one you can see up on the right side of the entry just before it leaves the property. It picks up all the stormwater. It's collected and then conveyed through a water quality unit. You can see that it's a structure just before the sidewalk, on the backside of the sidewalk on our property. That is a water quality structure that provides the full water quality treatment, removes all the suspended solids, so it's clean water being discharged to the city system. And from that point, it's routed, connected to the city drains in Merrimack Street. So there won't be any, during storm events, there won't be storm water flowing across the sidewalk and any torrent of water running across the sidewalk and in the street is collected and conveyed directly to the system. And as far as water, there's ample water right off of, water and sewer will be provided right off of Merrimack Street. And I think that covers this. It's not much, really not too much in the site. It's just, it's a compact site, urban setting. And we've done our best to basically keep it compact. We've got the parking in the rear, kept it safe for negotiating cars entering and leaving. It's definitely for urban residential parking, there's ample room for negotiating the site and parking. Again, okay, landscape. So landscape, there's two street trees. There's some larger trees around the rear of the property. There's not much opportunity for planting, but in the open areas, we've provided ground cover shrubs and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 larger trees to enhance the landscape on the property.
Great, thanks, Steve. Good evening. Scott Brown, the architect of the project, and very excited to be here tonight. Nick stated it's been a long time. It's taken us a long time to get to this point. This project initially started out, 8 years ago with a kind of a rough concept sketch from an architect colleague of Nick's, and then it went immediately to sort of an artist's rendering. And when I first came to the project and saw that initial concept, I really thought that it was spot on and entirely appropriate for Newburyport and then this site in particular. So it really has been our job to sort of refine this, bring up the level of detail, and ultimately make it work. So when we first got this project, one of the first things we did is we studied the building immediately across the street from this, 44 Merrimack, which is a classic sort of New England mill building. And what this has some similarities to that building in terms of window patterns, floor-to-floor heights, and even to a certain extent, some of the detail. Although I will say that I think what we have here, through the refinements we've made, it's the detail is a level up from what we're seeing at 44 Merrimack Street and slightly richer, but not necessarily over the top. So what we're seeing here is that perhaps most of you are sort of seeing this for the first time. This is an illustration that we put together in the last couple of weeks, perhaps has not been uploaded to the portal. And we put this together in response to some comments at the Historic Commission. And the Historic Commission really liked this project. And it's one of the first times where they, in my experience, they've had very little to say about it. And but one of the comments or questions they had was relative to the overall context of this building, overall and its relationship to the neighborhood. And we realized, like in our submission package, that we were really sort of lacking that. So we had this put together in order to understand the relationship of this building to the building to the left of it, which is actually owned by our client, and the building to the right of it. I think this sort of demonstrates that, what we're doing here really sort of at least fits in relative to the abutting buildings. So one of the things that you'll notice here is that there is quite a bit of cross slope on this site. When you're out there, it's really deceptive, but essentially from the right-hand property line to the left-hand property line, which is immediately to the right of that building on the left there, which is on the corner of Main and Merrimack, there's almost 5 feet grade change. And as a designer, when we're putting a building, the front of a building on a cross slope, it presents a number of challenges, and it was a very difficult thing for us. So, and it's one of the reasons why this building has sort of a center entrance. And again, this is from the original concept, which I think was spot on, because when you have multiple spaces that need to be accessed off the street, you want to be able to access those with one door at grade, and it's really an accessibility issue. So that's one of the main reasons why this building sort of has a center entrance, that leads to sort of like the commercial units on the first floor and also leads to the residential units above. Next slide, please. So this is our front elevation, a little closer view of it, and, we have a, center entrance, canopy above it. Immediately above that, we have, some Juliet balconies, for the residential units on the second and third floor. And, these are, really, these decorative railings only come out, from the building, about 12 inches. On the opposite, on the outer ends of these buildings, on the building, we have some larger balconies, and these are actually spaces where somebody can walk out on. And I think what we're doing here is very important to provide these residential units with some outdoor space. And if we can't provide outdoor space, we at least need to make it feel like if they throw the windows open, that they feel like they're kind of outside. So that's what these Juliet balconies doing in the center of the building. Again, with ground floor. There are two sort of commercial units to the right and left, one to the right, the center entry door, one to the left, and 16 residential units on the second, third, and penthouse levels. The penthouse has 4 residential units. And what we're seeing here is all the fenestration at the roof level. That's for 2 residential units. There's 2 residential units in the back. So there is a terrace up there. This building does have a parapet that is in guardrail height. And, and that's what we're, doing 2 things. One, to conceal sort of that terrace, and also providing. In terms of overall heights, this is very, very similar to 44 Merrimack Street. In fact, if we were to measure from basically mean grade to the roof, this is nearly identical. The big difference is this sort of parapet that we're creating, which 44 Merrimack Street does not have. And again, that parapet is about providing a guardrail, for those penthouse units. So we do have lighting on the building. I think we have 6 lights at the second floor, mounted to those brick pillars. We have some wall-mounted signs and brackets. Again, you can see those below the light. 2 of those, on either side. Next slide, please. So this is the left side elevation. This is as you would see the building with your back towards Green Street, looking out Merrimack. The elevation on the opposite side, which we don't have in this PowerPoint presentation, is nearly identical to this. The only difference is that first floor is a little closer to grade because that's on the uphill side. So off to the right there, you'll see those 2 balconies that I spoke of for the residential units in second and third floor. They're in a corner. Beyond that, you'll see our front entry canopy, which extends out over the sidewalk. In the lower left-hand corner, that's the back of the building. That's where our parking area is. And, this has been a challenging site. We've tried to provide as much parking as we could possibly. And, one of the things that we've had to resort to is cantilevering the back of the building in order to kind of give enough square footage to the residential units above. So because of this, it's hard to sort of do, a traditional looking cantilever. What we've done here is that the front of the building is very traditional design to address the street. And on the back of the building, we've taken a slightly different approach where it's a little bit more modern in its design. The penthouse units, in terms of materials, the penthouse units are going to be an aluminum clad panel product. And then the back of the building immediately above the cantilever there, that's sort of a more residential fiber cement. We do have a number of columns along the back of the building. They're going to be aluminum clad. We are going to need to have concrete bases on those. We're actually not showing that in this drawing. Those concrete bases are going to be necessary in order to protect those columns from the vehicles. Next slide, please. So back of the building, we can see the parking immediately bottom of the building. We have a center entrance, which leads to an elevator and stair lobby for the residential units above. We have a number of balconies. These are Juliet balconies on the back, meaning that they come out from the building no more than 12 inches. And the idea is that doors, these residents can throw these doors open, feel like they can feel like they're outside. The penthouse on this section of the elevation is held back from the wall below about 12 feet, 2 feet rather. Whereas in the front of the building, we're pulling it back nearly 7 feet. Up there in the upper left-hand corner, or right-hand corner, those are two balconies or two of the penthouse units. Next slide, please. So just a couple of sheets showing, sort of the palette of materials that we're using here. We're going to be proposing aluminum windows. They are all double hungs with simulated divided lights. We're proposing a water-struck historic brick, which is the same brick that's, essentially on just about every masonry building here in Newburyport. Very, very New England thing to do is to use water-struck brick. We have a cast stone base. We're proposing cast stone for the lintels and sills. It's a great looking product. It's come a long way over the years, but really the primary reason we're using it is that we've seen a couple of projects. One of them is, Nick just spoke about earlier, at the bottom of Market Street where the granite is actually spalling and failing. And, we haven't seen that. That won't happen with the cast stone. So we want this to look great and kind of hold up for the long term. On the right side there, we have some images of what those aluminum columns, would look like. We have some, images of the siding we're proposing to use. Also some imagery of the sign brackets that we think would be appropriate for this building. Next slide, please. So this is our ground floor plan. Like I said, that we have two commercial units used to be determined. I know it's showing retail here. I particularly don't think that's a particularly great fit for this site, in part because I don't think it gets a lot of pedestrian traffic. Perhaps with this building, it might, Nick had spoke about reactivating the sidewalk here. That's certainly help. Center, we've got a center entry here. So a lobby, which leads to sort of two commercial spaces. We have a lobby in the back, elevated the residential units, and two sort of egress stairs, at either end. Next slide, please. So our second and third floors are identical. We have 3 stairs in the building, which is perhaps a little bit unusual, but we've provided those, 3 stairs, particularly the center stairs, in order to kind of give us a little bit more flexibility, with the floor plan, in particular. In a minute, you'll see what the penthouse looks like in terms of the floor layout. And you can see that this putting the stair in the middle actually makes the penthouse layout a little bit efficient. But again, a total of 6 residential units on the second and third floors. These are all about 1,000 square feet. Next slide, please. It's the penthouse layout. At the top of the page, it's Merrimack Street. That's the terrace, which showed, terrace which is about 6 or 7 feet deep. And lower left-hand corner, right-hand corner, those are those 2 sort of balconies which face the back parking lot. And in the middle, you can see how sort of the addition of that third stair, really helps make these units kind of workable and larger, as opposed to sort of having a central corridor right down the middle to make this floor really inefficiently. Next slide, please. So a couple of artist renderings. This is from the west with our back to basically the black cow looking up to the parking garage. Green Street's on our left. Next slide, please. This is from the west. essentially a parking garage on our right, Green Street on our left. Next slide, please. Steve Story already spoke about some of the peer review comments that have been addressed. Some of the things that we had in our initial submission was an infiltration system that has been reduced. The latest site plan, we've added drainage details, we've added details for the guardrail at the back of the site. The exterior lighting was provided in the original package, but it wasn't included on the engineering plans from Millennium. It was actually architectural plans. So I think the peer review would actually miss that. So that is now on Millennium's plans. And we've also have provided cut sheets for all the lighting as well. And also, Steve had spoken about like the addition of the sidewalk continuing across the driveway. So those have all been addressed. Next slide, please. And finally, just a summary of the public benefits, and there are a lot here. Nick has always talked about the infill of the gap tooth here. It's a term he likes to use, and this is sort of an unsightly lot, and we're proposing something here that, like I said, is entirely appropriate for this location. And I think is, from a design standpoint, is hopefully going to sort of stand the test of time and look like it's always belonged here in Newburyport. We're also very importantly reactivating the sidewalk here. And like I said, I think this is a section of Merrimack Street that doesn't get a lot of traffic. And I think part of that is because it's somewhat unsightly. So hopefully this project will, fix that. And, lastly, just providing some different types of housing units here. With the exception of the penthouse units, which are about 1,200 square feet, the rest of the units are about 1,000 square feet, which is a nice sort of very modest square footage. And finally, hopefully this project is going to make downtown Newburyport even better. So I'll close and we'll be happy to answer some questions. Thank you.
Any initial questions or comments?
Just a couple of questions, just concerning the lighting in the back of the building. You mentioned that there are two lights in the parking lot. And are those down-facing lights, so forth, contained?
Yes, there'd be two down-facing lights. You can see there's one, there's that small island there, and then 5 spaces to the left, there's one there. So they're both cut off down-facing lights. I think I do have some photometrics with that I could add to the plan to show that.
And as far as the lights underneath the parking that's underneath the building, those are just like ceiling lights coming down?
Yeah, they're just these
Yeah.
recessed ceiling lights.
And then one other question, you expanded the area where the dumpster is located. Does that enable a larger dumpster to be placed there?
It's slightly large. It's slightly larger. I think what I did is I kind of rotated and shifted it so a truck could come in straight in on it. And just take up one lane. So if there was any conflict, the car could swing by on the right coming in or left leaving.
But
We can confirm what size dumpsters will fit in that enclosure also.
there is some concern about it being adequate for the number of units.
Yeah. And I guess that would, a lot of it might dictate that maybe they'd have to come twice a week or something of that nature. I don't think we'd probably increase the frequency versus increase the size just because of the restricted area in the rear.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments?
Yeah. There are certifications of the gas tanks. Yes, certainly the, good evening. Thank you for your time. My name is Renee Bernard, 45 Merrimack Street. Regarding the closure of the site, it is completed by, was completed by Ransom Environmental Engineering. We have a 158-page report, basically concluding the site is ready for development.
So it gets signed off by anyone from?
It's been signed off by the state, and we can certainly provide that report.
So there are no limitations on excavation?
There's no
on the
activity,
site?
there's limitations on the site.
Yeah, actually, on a follow-up of that, we did as part of the stormwater analysis and such, we did extensive, so I think we did six test pits out there. And all of the test pits found clean material, no odor or anything, so it was all, no indication of any movements of it, so.
Steve, while you're up there, would you mind just explaining a little bit more detail as to how the stormwater drainage systems work? It wasn't entirely clear.
Yeah, so actually originally I had, we collected it and directed it to an infiltration chamber system.
Right.
And actually, both the city engineer and the peer review didn't feel it was necessary. They said it's not necessary. We just want clean water. We don't think it's a great idea to be infiltrating in a gas station, even though it hasn't been cleaned up, which makes sense. So actually, if we go to this one. Yep, that one there. So you can see, right behind the building, you'll see there's two, everything grades to those in the rear. Everything grades to those two, catch basins, the deep sunk catch basins with a hood. So that'd be the first level of treatment. And then from there, it's routed to a manhole where it bends and then runs out. And right there at the entry is that they call it a water quality unit. So those provide the final cleaning, which actually gives us the full 80% TSS removal, floatables and solids. So it's clean water, meets this was we were before in a wetland project. This would meet the full DEP stormwater standards as far as water quality. And then also you can see there's a small basin on the right. So as you know, as shown, the slopes from left to right. So that driveway is super elevated. So there's gutter line flow that will flow into that catch basin. It's picked up prior to flowing across the sidewalk. So we basically pick up the entire pavement and we collect it, treat it before we convey it up to the city.
Thank you.
Yeah. One thing I didn't mention on this is, as far as the parking in the rear, that's actually from the police station and such, that's pushed down. So the wall, there's an existing wall along the access to the police station, to the rear of those five, actually, areas. Yeah, keep going down. So that's just a short wall, but where the access way to the police station is behind those, right there. There's an existing concrete wall. It's about, I think, 4 or 5 feet high. So the parking spaces are pushed down. You really can't see the cars from above because they're kind of pushed in that hole bit up there, which is good. Kind of screens it from the surrounding area. We had to add a wall to the left of that. We tie into the city wall. There's an old timber wall. I think we're taking out some timber wall there that we'll be putting in one of those. It'll be a shade block wall, one of those concrete block walls that look like split granite. So we'll run it down that edge, and then we end up getting squeezed for a bit of size, squeezed a bit, and we're going to do a pile and lagging wall there just because we don't have the cross-sectional width. It's similar. I worked in the Kelly School, and where that driveway, with the access to the basement parking at the Kelly School, we did that same treatment on the right just because we only had 2 feet to go. It's steep a wall in. It's got to be 6 feet high. So that'll eventually be designed by the structural engineer would have to design it. I can't design it, but I've done enough of them. I know the cross-sectional thickness of it and such. And then from that point, we have an extension of, we turn back to the split block there, the shade block that we dive into tie back in, to grade there. So the entire area is really, it not only is it screened from Merrimack Street, it's kind of screened from the rear. Granted, it's the police access there, and I believe that's, city park, I believe it's, city hall parking and such in the gravel lot where the old, was that the old Barney World building was? I think that's what, years ago. So that's one thing I forgot to mention during the presentation, that the parking is, screened from all sides.
One other question, there is no utilities or mechanical equipment on the roof?
So actually, what we're hoping to do is to put them, mount them on the walls. Back wall parking. So we're hoping to avoid putting any kind of utilities.
So you could just clarify, so you mean back here?
Yeah, go to the next slide. You know, so very similar to what we did on our bottom of Market Street. So there will be these units that are mounted on the wall that those cars are facing. That's actually under the residential units above. So we're hoping to put all of the mechanical equipment there and keep it off. That's the plan. I think.
I have a question about the landscaping plan. I may have missed this somewhere else, but the plan shows what appears to be bollards with lights in the sidewalk, down facing lights. Got to the top of the thing there. And I'm not sure whether all of them, and I didn't notice them on the civil plan. So I'm wondering about those. It would be in the city right of way, so the city would be responsible for them?
That's a great question, Rick. There are two bollards that were originally put equidistant off the front entryway. I believe the other two dark circles are the period lights.
Okay,
The city standard issue period lights. So, you know, we're open to suggestions on whether the bollards work there to help define the entrance with the canopy over top of that. They obviously would be in the right of way. We would need permission to put them there. If they do in fact have lighting, they don't have to, but if they have lighting, there would be a maintenance responsibility with that. So.
I don't have a strong feeling, just would want to make sure the civil plans align with the landscaping plans.
And to that point, there's no question, we need to clean up the landscape plan, the site plan, and the architectural plans to make sure we can. We've obviously been making changes as a result of the peer review that haven't made it through everything. So we will do that.
And just one other point about that. I don't know whether this is the case or not, but if you have two bollards there, it might suggest that's a place to cross the street. We don't want to suggest that. It doesn't have a crosswalk, but you know, you often have that.
I don't know if the lighting is essential in the bollard. I think the bollards make some sense there. They're just solid steel bollards. That level of protection, but again, we're not.
So you're very close to the canopy too.
They're not that tall. There'd be no conflict, but they'd be out near the edges of it. If anybody feels strongly about that one way or the other, we can keep working on it and present something with a detail on the bollard, and you can decide at the next meeting whether you want.
It's just the question about, will the city accept responsibility? It's another one of those questions that
Right.
ends up going to the city council.
If I may, having been through something, I'm happy to help coordinate on bigger matters, etc. I can see down these things. Don't have a strong preference for it. With all it being there, but obviously we get conditions related that such that if the city does not accept that in the right way, and there's probably not improvements, then they just remove the plans.
I did have another question. Getting back to the dumpster in the back. Does this revised plan address the concerns that were raised by you and by Molly?
I mean, I would refer to others, of course, in their capacity. My only concern was just based on discussions I had with Molly, who's the city's energy and recycling coordinator, that she handles all the city's waste management, just that the size seems small based on experience and discussions with her. So, I'm satisfied, that perhaps we want to put a condition or project, like just to clarify that, the applicant's required to do, this frequent pickups is necessary, not for, accumulation of trash. But it seemed like something, I think it was Steve that mentioned earlier, that clearly they might have to have more frequent pickups than larger. On a typical project this size, I expect it to be larger, but I think it's fine if it is picked up more frequently.
Wasn't there a question about the second dumpster for recycling?
Yeah, I got, that is another question, I guess, more about the configuration, which, could be resolved, but I don't know if the applicant has spoken about the intended size of dumpsters and how that'd be configured in there. That might be something the applicant could clarify for the next meeting or.
Yeah.
And I know Molly's helpful if you want to talk with her in the office to make sure the board has the answer, we can talk with her. Because she obviously can chime in. Obviously, I think there's an understanding here that this might require more people to pick up, but at the same time, just in that size. Needs to be bigger, like it.
Question or comment? Just one last comment on the volume. I don't have any particular objection to the bollards themselves, but I'm trying to think of a precedent for native bollards. So if it's not necessary, if it is, it might seem a little out of character. If there's no other questions or comments, I'll open up the floor for public comment. Please come forward, state your name and address.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Carrie Patty, and my husband Jack and I own the building at 66 Pleasant Street, right behind this proposed building. My parents, Carol and Jerry Rourke, also have retired there. It is right next to City Hall, and we have 2 residential units, and then we have a small unit in the front faces. We have lived there for many years and we do live in a somewhat urban area, but Brown Square is a very quiet residential neighborhood. After 5 o'clock, I mean, it's just so peaceful. Over the years, we have endured a few shortcomings in that half of our land out back was taken by eminent domain by the city to put the entrance in the back and egress to the police station. And, we lost a good amount of our land there. We also lost our full Riverview when Horton's Yard. We do understand that this is what happens in the city. But the proposed project that's right behind us, and before I got my letter, just recently, I had no idea. It's my here, so we're all in the same neighborhood, but I had no idea this was being proposed. And some of our concerns are, we are in the back. Not only will we be looking into probably the second building, blocking all of the natural light that comes to the back. We have 2 decks that are out the back, which are our area for getting outside, and a patio. We do have a fence, but currently when we look to the right, we're looking right into the 2nd or 3rd floor City Hall. This building looks from the elevation like it's going to be about as high as City Hall. So we will be completely penned in. Not only are we going to have our natural light blocked, but we're going to be looking into, now that I see the back of the building with all of these residential units. So I would imagine each one of these little residential units in their balcony are going to have a light. And the overall lights from the building, and then the parking area, which I didn't expect, just the cars coming in at any hour of the day, the exhaust, the just the looking into the dumpster, the sounds and noises and the smell of the dumpster and coming several times a week to pick up and drop off. And it's just really gonna change our quality of life immensely. There's also the other half of our building has 2 residential units, which are unfortunately empty at the moment, so no one could really come and speak to you. There's also a residential building to the left of that is a very nice duplex building that would be affected by this. And in all of the presentation, I did see a lot of consideration given to the front and the side and the Merrimack Street view, but really not much given to the Brown Square and that will back up to this. 4 stories is a very large. And we will just be, our building's been there since 1860, 1870. So it's a new structure and the building next to it has been there for many, many years as well. The historical district. So it's just very disappointing to think that we'll be sitting out on the deck, my parents will be sitting out on their deck and looking into a parking lot dumpsters in the back of a, into the second floor of the building. With, and I really don't understand what those Juliet balconies are going to afford anybody because they're going to be looking out into the back. Parking lot, exhaust, and we'll be waving to each other. But it's in very close proximity, so I felt remiss that I didn't get up here and say something. I just think it's a very large project. But thank you very much.
Any other comments? We'll close the public comment then. Back to the board for any further. I guess we could get into design comments.
I'm going to take these things.
We'll reopen the public comment.
Yes, we live in Carroll Rock, and we're part of the building with my daughter at 66 Street. Sorry, I have a problem tonight. We're the ones that sit out on the deck. And I came down here tonight thinking, well, this is progress. We bought in a neighborhood that we love. I came from the city, Brookline Avenue, so I know what tall buildings look like. But all the attention is on the front of the building. The back and how historical it looks. The back of the building, yes, it's more modern, but it's ugly. That's where they're gonna put the lights and the dumpster and the cars. And people, like my daughter said, will be sitting on our deck, looking at people sitting on their decks. That's a little too close. And then the roof, they're gonna have lights on that roof, I'm sure. Because if people are gonna utilize and go outside, they need lighting. And the lighting is gonna be. But that's all I wanted to say. Newburyport's a beautiful city and they've done a good job on it. So I came down here tonight and I wasn't gonna say a word. I saw that. Okay.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Hi, my name is Colin Corso, and I'm the owner of Street and 50 Merrimack Street as well. I think we're the largest project. This project, and I generally oppose, what I'm seeing in the project, aesthetic standpoint. Sent a letter to the board outlining our concerns primarily about the seismic activity, in which I know they really have a chance to, respond to at this point. But I just thought I should speak just to be sure that the board received the letter and something to consider through the process, not only for my property, but also, City Hall, police station, being here, Black Cow. Similar space areas. In the letter I outlined, I remember when and the ground floor of my actually below Max Street. So the entire occupied section is essentially against a retaining wall. So, I'm not a geotech. I think there's probably some level of transfer due to that fact, we have lower. So I just wanted to make sure the board received the letter and considered
We are addressing. We are, sorry. We are looking at that street plan.
Okay.
Any other comments?
May I just add that if all those utilities sorry, may I just add that if all those utilities are put on the back of the building, as was discussed, air conditioning units, all of that, that is also going to be a 24/7, loud humming noise towards the residential units that are behind it. I didn't even think about the vibrations for construction. I mean, these are all buildings behind it, so that just hurt my ears up too, because we do have residents that will be living there. So be it for the noise of construction, but just to make sure that nothing happens to those older buildings behind, as I'm sure you're worried about City Hall. I guess that's the last I want today. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll close public comment. Any other? Correct, we have some design comments. I think we can go through as part of the public record here. I think some of this has been passed along to you at this point, so it may be an opportunity to respond to some of it tonight. I think we'll get this. We asked a question about soils, so we don't need to ask that again. Just in terms of building height. You're asking for approval of the special permit related to additional height for the building. And I think given some of the public comment and given some of the concerns that we have talked about before, I think you've got to provide more documentation relative to the scale of the building. So I appreciate the street wall elevation that you presented tonight. I would ask that you extend that at least down to include the city parking garage. So we can see that entire stretch of street wall, but I think given comments from the abutters, I think it's also important to see the scale of the building from the Pleasant Street. And I think I would suggest that you do that in a couple of different ways. One is to develop a cross section through the site, across Merrimack Street, showing the building, downhill site running towards the river, hill portion of the site running up towards Pleasant Street. So that we can see the scale of all of those buildings and what the impact is of the proposed structure on around the views, surrounding. But I think if it's possible, you could also show viewpoints from uphill. And I ask that for two reasons. One is views for residents who are living uphill. The other is the view of the landscape. And to understand the suggestion relative to mechanical. think it's important to see what the state of this proposed structure looks like when viewed from. So we can put together related to that, I think the discussion. On the subject of retail entry. I understand this is a sloping site. But we did show an elevation tonight, showed as a dot. Of the elevation of the ground floor slab. And it looked to me like, at least for the first couple of storefront bays, there's only a few inches of difference in elevation between the sidewalk and the ground floor. I think you've got to think very seriously about providing direct access to retail. I think it's important for the retail, for commercial spaces there. I think that I'm not sure how deliveries happen to.
Could you just point out on that elevation where you're referencing?
The dotted line is the elevation. At least those first two window panes, either side of it.
Yeah.
They're only a point. So I don't think it's out of the question. I think it's very important.
We'll look at, yeah.
Just operationally, if you don't have those entries. In terms of service and deliveries to those two commercial spaces, what you're suggesting is that everything comes through that central lobby entrance. And that's not a very big lobby. I don't know where the mailboxes are. I don't know where the direct is with names and numbers. I don't know where any of that exists in a small lobby that has double doors on all four walls. In that space, you're suggesting that all deliveries. So that's a question operationally. I'm not sure where the trucks are standing while deliveries are happening either. So I think you need to think about that whole in terms of how the retail spaces operate. So that for me is a very big. You talked about the canopy and acknowledged the city council approval for that. I would at least think about whether that canopy has to come. I'm thinking about fire trucks, I'm thinking about other trucks pulling up to the curb. And I think coming right out to the curb line, maybe pushing it a little bit too far. Parking we've talked about, I'm very happy that you acknowledged the concrete bases on the columns in the parking lot. That would be a good development. Trash pickup we have talked about. I would only ask if you have really looked at whether the truck can maneuver in the entry driveway with enough space that cars can pass. And not block that driveway, and what the operational plan is around that. Roofscape we've talked about. I think it's an interesting concept, mechanical, but you need to provide a lot more information. I think the abutters have a very legitimate. We need to see specifically what that mechanical equipment is, what the noise levels are, what you're proposing to locate them, because all of this is visible one way or another from up there. And it's a significant concern, I think, for the surrounding property. Just a design comment. You showed a lot of precedent images from around Newburyport. And I didn't see in any of those images, and again, I'm trying to think of precedent for this, but I can't think of an example. It's a re-entrant on a building of this size. Re-entrant as in the last day that sets it. And I think that's That's a little unusual, but what makes it particularly unusual is the metal balcony that are hung in that space at the second and third floor. Those are potentially very prominent features, um, very visible in the street, some furniture, the things that are out there. And I would just put on the table that I think this building might be a little quieter in terms of visibility of elements like that. If you allow those corners to normally, you can still have the balconies there, but maybe those balconies have openings that are the scale of the window. And you have a masonry pier at the corner, and it all could feel very natural in terms of the width of the building. But you don't have the visibility issues that you have with the open balconies. And you don't have the unusual feature of metal balconies at a corner, which you see around. So I think if you brought a parapet wall up to the height of the windowsill, if that didn't get you to proper, you could add a metal rail to that. But I think all of that gets you a quieter building elevation, and perhaps conceals from view some of the things that might. Yeah, that's something that I would want to see you at least take a look at, into what the alternative. We talked about lighting details a little bit, but unless I'm missing it in the documentation. There's a lot of cut sheets that have been provided, so I know generally what the intention is with lighting, but it would be good to understand color. So the cut sheets provide options, but what I was looking at didn't specify exactly what the selection is. So color and finish, what the color temperature is of the lighting that is suggested, what the light levels are. All of the fixtures you present options for all of that, but you haven't identified which one you would actually specify. So I think most of the information is there, you just have to. Lastly, Mr. Palmisano mentioned this, there are concerns about construction, related to abutting. And I think this is a broader discussion, and probably a discussion that will extend into a building permit environment. But there needs to be a construction management plan that looks at existing condition survey for surrounding buildings, looks at periodic and frequent monitoring, looks at construction methodologies related to foundations. So they're not driven piles or piles, all of those things to reduce vibration and impact effects on surrounding buildings. So that's another discussion, not necessarily design, but in terms of construction, that I think is very important that we need to continue as well. So I'm going to take a rest for a few minutes. If there are any other questions.
That list that you just went through, Mr. Chairman, is that the list that we discussed? Was that generated from the discussion we had prior to this hearing last meeting?
Yeah.
Way one. Okay. It sounded very familiar, which is good. So I won't repeat
Just wanted
anything.
to get that on the record.
Appreciate it. The only comment I will make is one of the discussions we had when we talked about the rear of the building was on that list. The sight lines, the impact, the scale. So we hear you, and we had that was probably one of the lengthier discussions beyond lighting and something.
I have one comment to add, and without prescribing how I would deal with this comment, to incorporate a lot of the things that you just heard, I think there may be an opportunity that on the view from the east rendering, which you can put that up on the screen. we focused a lot, I think, prior to this hearing on the view from the west. This view from the east, I think, is gonna be the way a lot of pedestrians experience this building, and I'm really excited to say some nice things about the project. I think that the general design is striking a nice balance between historical features and not like being a total copy of any building that we know. So I think the Merrimack Street side is pretty successful, but I think an opportunity here, and might give you some ideas how to incorporate some of these other comments, is that it's such a straightforward design. It doesn't have to be so perfectly symmetrical. I think this downhill side has a real opportunity to become more pedestrian oriented on this corner and start to draw people up towards, up the hill, because you're going to be asking pedestrians to use those spaces, those retail spaces, to kind of start walking up a hill into a part of the city that people haven't walked as much. So I think there might be an opportunity with a little asymmetry to the design. I wouldn't be opposed to seeing something a little more unique on this corner in particular to create kind of a connection to downtown. So without describing what I would have in mind for that, I just think there's an opportunity there to maybe explore something a little different and address some of the chair's comments as well. Oh, and particularly, different levels and different entry solutions as well.
Just kind of building on that, and thinking about the pedestrian, most people aren't gonna see the front view. So you're gonna see it coming from the parking garage or coming from Green Street. So I think that the symmetry is not as important as getting access to those spaces.
The only other thing on the list, I might have slept through that one, was the signage. We talked a little bit about the plan, because of retail with a little more detail will help. Oftentimes you wait until you get retail, then you discuss signage, but just the framework of it. Hopefully, have some.
If I could, when Nick and I spoke about this, we talked generally about sort of a sign package in the sense that it would be consistent signage, the placement of the sign in the building and so forth, recognizing that there are sign regulations for downtown and businesses, names might rotate, that the board could feel comfortable in approving of. So.
I just would add one thing. Mr. Pennington brought it up. I do want to compliment the development on forward a proposal that could have such a positive impact on than a site that is asking for something like this for a while. I think this is approaching a very good solution. I think there's a lot of things to work out. But I do want to say that I appreciate the development team's efforts and I think you're on the right. Yeah, it's gonna be a terrific one. So with that, I think we're headed in the direction of a continuum. Yeah. So unless there are any other that we ask, if you have a suggestion relative.
The next meetings in May would be the 7th. I would note that on May 7th, there's a zoning hearing. We might actually have two zoning hearings together tonight, so just the important board members here. Applicants here, whichever works for you for turnaround. Typically, the board would expect materials no later than a week before the meeting, so if you look at in preparation, so just thinking about that.
21 is good.
21, okay.
If it works for you, it seems like we have lots of good. Thank you.
I'll move to continue the site plan review application, the DOD special permit for mixed use, special permit for height, and the ITIS special permit, public hearing for 449-57 Merrimack Street to the meeting at 5/21/2025.
All those in favor? Opposed? Lovely. Last public hearing of the night is 1 Center Street.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board, it's been a long time, happy new year, I think, maybe, that's pretty sad. Yep, no planning board action. My name is Lisa Mead, for the record, Mead Talent Acosta, 30 Green Street in Newburyport. Joseph Boyson, for the property at 1 Center Street. With me tonight is Eileen Graff, who's the architect on the project. Joseph Moisen, who, by the way, the property has been in the Moisen family since the early 1950s, and he's just purchased it from his aunt, so he's continuing to stay in his family. He proposes to renovate and add a small addition on the existing. You can go to the next slide, Andy. On the existing structure and change it from a non-conforming single family, which all of you know is not permitted in the B2 zoning district. To a conforming mixed-use structure with professional services on the first floor and an apartment residential unit on the second. The property is located in the B2 zoning district, downtown overlay district. It's currently, as I said, a single-family home. If you go to the next. The proposal is on a pre-existing non-conforming lot, which has 2,426 square feet of area, 1,000 square feet are required. The only non-conformity other than lot size is the setback on Center Street, which would be the front yard because it's the longest frontage. And that's actually 1'1" over the property line. If it were actually inside the property line, it would be conforming because there are no setbacks. So it's non-conforming because it's over the property line, and that's the bay windows that are on Center Street. All other dimensional requirements are met. The proposal includes 15% demolition of the exterior walls and renovation of the interior, as I said, and changes to the exterior as well. So we actually require on this little project a DOD special permit, a special permit for the mixed use, a special permit for non-conformities because we are modifying a pre-existing non-conforming structure for a different use, even though we're not really changing any of the non-conformities, and a special permit for the ITI Act parking. So the history of the project is, you go to the next slide. The structure was constructed around in the 1875, according to the district data sheets, where it's listed as contributory, or 1850, according to the assessor's records, which, as all of you know, is kind of the fallback for the assessor's records. So we rely on the district data sheets. It was listed on the data sheets as 34 Water Street, so you wouldn't find it as a Center Street address on the data sheets. It's actually 34 Water Street. There is no Form B for the structure, and it appears on the 1906, 1914 Sanborn maps and the 1924 assessor's map. So if you can go to the next slide, Andy. So here's the current My Maps. All of you are probably familiar with this. This is the corner of Center and Water Street. You can see the parking lot for the Mexican restaurant next door. Across the street is the point, of course. And so here's the property in the yellow outline. Next slide, please. So this is the 1906 assessor's map at the time. Not surprisingly, there was more than one structure on this lot. Obviously, the structure on Water Street is gone, but you do see the second structure, which is the structure in question. Next slide, please. And this is the 1914 assessor's map. Again, we still have the structure up front. But then you can see the bay windows kind of appear in this one, but they've always been. So that's the structure. And then the next slide is the 1924 assessor's map. I have to tell you, I'm not really sure when that original structure came down, but as you can see now, the Moisen name is still on this land up front. But the structure that we're talking about is listed as one here. So that's the structure in question. And the next slide, please. So, as we said, we're proposing to improve, exterior condition of the property, replace the vinyl replacement windows with double windows, restore the trim and the rakes and the corner boards, repoint the brick foundation, replace the cedar shingles in kind. We're gonna add the addition, which we believe is subservient to the main structure, and I'll talk to you about the historic commission comment shortly. And then a small amount of demolition on the exterior, with the primary gable form being preserved. We have been before the historic commission. As you know, you've received the report from the historic commission. Their comments included the current proposed changes to the structure have been carefully considered to ensure the preservation of its historic character. They also said the size and styling of the proposed addition do not take away from the style and massing of the original structure. So we think those are all really important comments. Next slide, please. So just so you get an idea of what the existing conditions look like, this is the property. I'm sure you've all walked by it a million times. So this was taken in the winter. Thank goodness, at least right now, we don't have snow, although we're due to have snow tonight. That's the front elevation on Center Street. Next slide, please. And this is the south elevation. So this is the left-hand side as you're facing it on Water Street. Next slide, please. And then that's the north elevation from Water Street. And the next slide, please. So here's the site plan, just so you can get an idea of what we're working with. We're not changing anything with regards to the footprint. We do add some exterior stairs on the rear, so we can get out of the second story. And then Eileen's going to talk about the second story we're going to put on that front bump out. But otherwise, the building on the site isn't going to change. We'll talk about the parking and whatnot in a little bit, but just to align that, there will be 2 parking spaces on site. Andy's pointing to them now, and those resolve the residential requirements. Then we're required to have 2 parking spaces related to the commercial use, and we're requesting an ITIF special permit for those parking spaces. Towards the end, we'll talk a little bit about the sidewalks and the permits. But for now, what I want to do is turn it over to Eileen to review the architectural plans.
Good evening, Eileen Graff, with Graff Architects. So, as Lisa mentioned, this is a very simple building. And what we have in front of us is one of these, that area is historically known for these modest homes that supplying housing for the people who work at the shipyards. So this is in keeping with that. This house is about 18 feet by 28 feet. Some people have garages bigger than that footprint. So it's about 1,000 square feet of living space. And so what we're proposing is a second story put on the left side, single story addition, which you recall from the map shown that actually was a later addition to the structure. And it can be seen as well at the foundation level. The original house has a brick foundation. This one has concrete block. But we're proposing a second story addition. You can see it at the bottom left. There's a change there from the Center Street side, but then also from the Street side, you can see the shallow roof pitch on the second story there. Again, sort of staying subservient to the main form. On that same bottom right, you can also see the proposed dormer that's directly behind it. So we're placing that on the eastern side, the least visible of all the elevations, and that will help. Those 2 additions will help living space dramatically. Again, going from 1,000 square feet to 1,300 square feet. So 300 square foot addition, but very valuable in its use. So some things to talk about are the changes in materials. Really, the building is as a form, is really being maintained essentially from the centerpiece side as very pure, the original. But what we want to do is update siding, keeping in kind. It's currently retired looking shingles. We'll replace that with Mavex cedar shingle, windows. Vinyl windows, one of them on replacements. We're gonna bring that back to a 2x2 double glazed window. The roofing will also get updated to the architectural shingles. At the lower level of the brick, we'd like to repoint that where needed. Trim and such. Heat details will also get prepared in kind in the new product. There is a chimney there that currently is not of use functionally, and that will be rebuilt in a faux chimney with a story. And as you can see, sorry, on the bottom left, you also see the proposed stair that we are adding on the back to be able to provide egress from the second level living space. Then Andy, if you go to the next slide, you can see wrap around the building. Here on the bottom left, you can see that shed dormer, third floor level. And then also on the right, you can see, the side of that same dormer as well as the egress stairs. I think that one thing to point out, actually, if you want me to hit changes on next year.
Oh, sure, yeah.
We can go to the site plan, Andy, and just talk about some of the changes outside. If we start on the bottom, on the far left corner, from the Water Street, Center Street corner, there's an existing chain link fence that is supposed to be removed. So that should improve the feel and quality of that property. As we travel down Center Street from the corner, you can see that notation that says concrete sidewalk. And that hits the first parking spot. We're going to transition there into a brick sidewalk.
Oh, no, I'm gonna talk about this.
And then as we traveling, I'll stay on fencing. If we travel to the right side of the property, there is a, I'm sorry, yes, that exactly. Thank you, Aiden. There's a sort of dilapidated fence that also will be replaced as part of this. So those are the improvements you'll see in terms of fence. But again, overall, a very modest home that we're just trying to update and improve the living space for the owner. And I think in the process, preserving the form as much as keeping the changes mostly primarily on.
Well, so my everybody's suspension, we'll talk about the sidewalks now before I go through the criteria. How's that?
Just a clarification while Lisa's handing that out. We had some discussion about this earlier today. I think she and I are on the same page about some of the details here. What you're seeing is marked on the handout copy. That could be uploaded to the portal tomorrow, and what you're seeing on the screen is in the presentation before the mark. So this is better than do that. But the mark is basically added on top of what you're seeing in front of you. It's just not very.
So as you all know, there's the tree and sidewalk, the famous tree and sidewalk ordinance in the city. So in relationship to that, the DPW went down 30 days or so ago. Because as you can see, there's a lot of sidewalk here, right? For a small project, that's a big chunk of change to do it. And, you know, if the tree and sidewalk ordinance is triggered, which means that the value of the construction, Joe's doing this construction himself. So if the value of the construction is more than 50% of the value of the structure, then we have to replace all of the sidewalks, which would include the corner, right? You get the tip down and everything. So that's pretty expensive. But it's in pretty tough shape. And so the DPW sometimes tries to work with you because of the cost of something like this. But in this instance, they were concerned about that. So I have two conditions here One is if the tree and sidewalk ordinance is triggered, and one is if the tree and sidewalk ordinance is not triggered. And then I've attached, very nicely done hand-drawn sketch plans to explain what the words mean, but I can show you one, on the plan itself that Andy has up here. So if the tree and sidewalk is triggered, right? Joe will have to replace all of the sidewalks along the perimeter of the property to the brick sidewalk on Water Street. So we would not be replacing the brick sidewalk as it exists as brick, but everything from the edge of that all the way up through Center Street to the edge of the property. That sidewalk would have to be replaced. In doing that, then also in order to accommodate the needed edge of the curb cut for the first parking space, that curb cut would be slid over to the edge of the parking space. But then in order to close up what currently has no curbing on the property, that curbing would be extended down to the edge of the second parking space, right? So we would formalize the sidewalk as part of that construction. And then because the sidewalk actually goes into the property by 10 to 12 inches, depending on where you are, right there where Andy's pointing. Joe has agreed to give an easement to the city to preserve that existing sidewalk area, right? So we wouldn't make the sidewalk any bigger, but when it's replaced, it would be there. And then we would do that easement similar to what we did at the corner of State and High to accommodate the sidewalk there that actually runs into the property. So that's if the tree and sidewalk ordinance is triggered. If the tree and sidewalk ordinance is not triggered, then the proposal that we talked to the Historic Commission about, and which is marked on this plan, everything I've said about the parking space and the curbing, et cetera, would take place in the easement, but the sidewalk itself would be replaced where the bituminous currently is. So starting at the edge of that concrete line there, up Center Street, through the bituminous, that would all be replaced with brick. Now, I was down there tonight, the chair's been down there, the concrete sidewalk to the left is in tough condition, right? So we would work with the DPW to tie that all together. And the goal would be to have the DPW do that at the same time that we were doing the rest, given the cost. So those are the two conditions that we believe will address the issues with both the curbing, the sidewalk easement into the property. And after I go through all of this, we're going to request that those two conditions and these very talentedly drawn plans become a part of the decision, so everybody's clear about what we're talking about. So Andy, if you could move forward past the architectural plans. So we have to comply with a number of criteria in the ordinance for our various special permits. The first special permit would be the DOD special permit. And as you know, we have to show that the alterations have to be compatible with the historic building and structures within the DOD. And also with compatible with the size, scale, height, color, material, character of both the historic building and the area in which it's located. Next slide, please. So in relation to the historic portion of the structure, we've shown that the enlargement does not change any of the setbacks and only extends it upwards. The proposal complements the existing volume and massing by placing the addition on the north elevation, yet remaining subservient to the existing eave and main portion of the structure. Next, in relation to the immediate area, the structure is much smaller than many of the buildings in the immediate area. Regarding the materials and character, the proposal utilizes appropriate materials and designs, as Eileen has reviewed with you. It's preserving and rehabilitating the structure with a modest increase of 301 square foot of area. And the addition, as I said, is small and subservient to the original structure. I point out again, go to the next slide, please, that we did receive a favorable report from the Historic Commission, including their comments related to the proposed changes of the structure have been carefully considered to ensure the preservation of its historic character. They also said that the size and styling of the proposed addition do not take away from the styling and massing of the original structure, and that the proposed alterations to the exterior of the structure is described to the NHC and the official filing have been thoroughly evaluated and would not adversely impact the historic values of the property or immediate surroundings. So we believe that we meet the DOD special permit criteria, but then also as part of the DOD special permit criteria, we have to meet all of the general special permit criteria in 10H7. But we also, lucky for you, have to meet those same criteria for the mixed use special permit. So I'm going to review them together at one time. So under 10H7, the first criteria is that the use requested is listed in the table of use regulations. Here, mixed use is allowed in the B2 district via special permit. Importantly, we are changing from use that is not allowed in the B2 to use that is allowed by special permit. The next criteria is that the requested use is essential or desirable for public convenience and welfare. Here, by allowing the mixed use by special permit in the B2 district, the city has determined it's essential or desirable to the welfare of the city. The proposal brings the property into conformance with the ordinance by removing the pre-existing non-conforming use and allowing a use by special permit. The next is that the requested use will not create undue traffic congestion or unduly impair pedestrian safety. Here, of course, there's plenty of sidewalks in the area. That's not going to be an issue. Plus, we're going to repair the sidewalks. And next, there won't be any undue traffic congestion. In fact, we're going to accommodate properly 2 parking spaces on the site. And then, of course, our request to have the ITIS. The next is the requested use will not overload the public water, drainage, or sewer system or other municipal system. Here, the proposal adds a use to the first floor, which is the small commercial use, which will not have any major impact on those. It's already used as a residence, so the use of the residential above is consistent with what's currently there. So there won't be any undue impact on the public facilities. The next is, are there any special regulations for the use set forth in the special permit table? And there are none. The next is the requested use will not impair the integrity or character of the district or adjoining districts. Here, the proposed mixed use does not impair the integrity or character of the district. In fact, there are many such structures purposefully located in the downtown for all the reasons that make our downtown vibrant and the envy of many communities in Massachusetts. The next is the requested use will not, by its addition to the neighborhood, cause an excess of that particular use. And here again, it won't cause an excess of that particular use. The next use, mixed use area, which goes to the next item that is in harmony with the purpose intent of the ordinance. So it's consistent with the district. So we have mixed use next door to the east, and then up at the corner of Center and Middle Street, there are 2 mixed use buildings, Middle Street Foods, and then of course the former law office that is both now commercial and residential. Of course, on Liberty Street at the corner of Liberty and State Street, there's a mixed use building, and they're scattered all throughout the area. So it's in harmony with the zoning for sure. And then finally, that the proposed use will not be conducted in a manner so as to omit any dangerous, nauseous, or injurious or otherwise objectionable activities. And of course, it won't, it's typical standard use for the downtown. So with that, for those 2 particular things, we think that we meet the requirements of the DOD special permit as well as the special permit for mixed use. The next is the requested special permit for non-conformities. Here under section 9B, there are 2 criteria for a commercial structure. One is that there will be no intensification or extension of an existing non-conformity or the addition of a new non-conformity. And in this instance, as I said before, the proposal, or excuse me, the existing structure is non-conforming for those 2 bump outs that go over Center Street and then the lot area. And so we're not creating any other new non-conformities, so we meet that criteria. And the next is that the proposed change will not be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing non-conforming structure. And again, it won't be because we're not making any changes to the existing non-conformities. And we believe that in fact, by improving the structure and the area generally, it will be much better for the neighborhood and the downtown generally. And finally, the requested special permit for parking under the ITIF. We are providing the residential parking on site, and then we are requesting to pay for 2 parking spaces into the ITIF fund, given the location that meets the requirements of the ordinance for proximity. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the board might have.
So we are not, through these special permits, we are not affecting in any way the bays, we're not permitting it because of the existing conditions.
I'm sorry, Rick, I didn't hear.
The bays in front of the 2 bays. that
Oh,
extend
no,
out,
we're not touching the base.
Because the planning board is not doing anything about them.
No.
They're just recognizing it.
That's correct.
There was I may have missed this in, I think's presentation. On the architecturals, there's a vertical lift. Can you talk about that? I couldn't figure out exactly how that fit into the whole entry.
With the change in use and now having the commercial space in the store, we're providing the vertical lift on that corner to allow access to that location.
Could you describe, I couldn't actually see how it worked. Points from the 2 directions.
So it might be easier, maybe the other direction. Or, yes. So as it works, how that's going to lift is to enter is actually would be from where that arrow is. And you're coming onto the lift and it would raise to get to the platform of where the top of the stairs.
Then there would be a gate.
And there'd be a gate on the other.
I couldn't visualize it. I'm curious about the boat chimney. Is that something we have to do? I mean, it seems silly to build something that's non-functional.
So so we've done it a number of places,
I know.
because the historic commission likes the chimneys to stay, and they like the change in the roof line. I mean, we don't have to do it.
I mean, I just wonder why we do it.
We do it because the historic commission really likes chimneys. But they also, I will say to their defense, they also understand if they're not functional, that there's a reason not to have the interior work instead of having to.
And my last question is about the sidewalk. So I went out there and I measured it and looked at the conditions and everything. Right now, there's a clear passage between the curb and the no parking sign, 38 inches. But it looks like about 16 inches of that is kind of grass. So, and that no parking sign, I believe, is on your property. I don't think so. I think it's off the.
Just off the street.
Yeah, it's well, it's right, it's actually right.
I see the sign.
So I think
That's
that is actually on your property. And, so I guess what I'm thinking, you talked about providing an easement for continuing the sidewalk. And I appreciate that. I guess what I would like to have when we have a final condition, and I assume we're gonna wait for an engineering plan to move it.
Well, it depends on where this. Lisa and I had talked about it with reference.
So we'll know tonight whether it's the ordinance applies or not?
No, but well, I think to your point, what I would do, is we're not gonna know to the ordinance by still the building permits. So, right, that's what triggers it, that's why I proposed both conditions. And so, if you want an engineered plan as opposed to my really nice handwriting, what we can say is before we commence the construction on the sidewalk, which of course all has to be done before the occupancy permit, that we submit an engineered plan. I don't have a problem.
And I guess what I was gonna say is, in addition to your wonderfully drawn plans and exquisitely written narrative.
Thank you very much.
I would like to actually specify a sidewalk, like, clear sidewalk width. of at least 36 inches, I'm not sure, but, you know, the brick sidewalk, not, because right now, I think it looks, you could argue that the sidewalk is 20 inches wide. And I really don't want.
No, I don't think that I don't even think that it's 20 inches wide. I think it's 36 inches wide.
And it's hard to tell because.
No, but we can say a minimum because it has to meet we have to meet those requirements because it's probably sidewalk. Joe doesn't have it, so we say a minimum of 36 inches, I don't have an issue.
Yeah, that's great. That's what I wanted
Yeah.
to make sure we have. But that's all.
Just one question. I just wanted to clarify as far as the entrance to the residential unit. Is that on the back
No, actually,
or is that part of the?
in that front elevation where I was pointing to, so actually that bottom left. So that door that we're seeing underneath the canopy there on the left addition there, that's the door to the residence. It has a second entry on the back, on the stair, We go to the second drawing, AO2, thank you. So at the top of the stair, that's the second entry. Yeah, then to the left drawing. The top of the stair, and that's the second entry.
And so on that front end, there's the two doors.
There's
off
two
of
doors,
that.
correct. And the bottom door under that one would be the second door.
Okay, thank you.
I'm concerned about the driveway, but I think it's solvable, but I think, just want to point out that I think, well, I guess three things. One, there's no back line. I think that's probably just oversight. There would definitely be a back line to concrete, but the 18 feet, I think also would probably need to be measured from the back of the sidewalk, not. Which is probably a matter of inches.
Yes, so I
We
can,
we're clarifying language in the decision if you'd like.
I can do, I mean, you can certainly do that, but I can ask, I'll just ask Everett to do that when he does the plan.
Yeah, those are pretty minor.
Yeah.
The third comment that was a little more major, which is that having the 9 feet right to the building will make it very difficult for that stairway to function. And then I was already thinking that, but then I saw the elevation where there's actually, because it's commercial use, not residential, you have to do the turn down handrail, which sticks out another, like, I forget how many inches that is. 12 inches. So that's like really put into that driveway. So do you have enough wiggle room to move the driveways
Scoot a little bit down to
down
Water
towards
Street.
Water Street? Yeah, I think it's just a little too tight.
That's fine.
Yeah, if I could, I don't think we put it out there with Director, Deputy Director, Public Service, the decision is a very awkward, condition there, it's a whole jumble of conditions along that street there. Or that section anyway, I definitely think that's worth a lot, we assessed the city side, being part for the crosswalk, so. It's not an issue, yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna have to coordinate it with Wayne and John anyway, so that's fine. And I'll have, when we submit that final plan, before we do all that construction, I'll have those things done.
Just would point them out.
Yeah, no, I think they're good points, Jamie, for sure.
You know, to feel like, well, first I should say, positive note. Very excited to see this project. We talked about this with planning because I think this is great to breathe life into this corner. It's very public area. A lot of people come out of town. I'm excited for Joe to have a nice home to live in there and fix it up. But incidentally, by potentially moving that, if you can, move the driveway a little bit closer to Water Street, even though it says no parking, a lot of people park there when it's a really busy night, when they're, looking for a spot and they can't seem to get one. That seems really convenient, and then becomes, I think, a public nuisance, and trying to get out onto Water Street, it impedes the view and becomes quite dangerous. We talked a little bit about this planning, where I think, addressing the sidewalk concerns, pulling the fence down, all of this is going to be helpful for that corner. It happens to be, I think, one of the busier side streets.
Yeah.
Friday and Saturday night.
And you can
I've
pick up.
witnessed many times where people are coming out of the point or the Mexican restaurant, and maybe they aren't thinking clearly. So
What do you suggest?
I see there.
Attorney, what do you suggest? So I think a couple of things to address that, Charlie, for sure. I think if we move that parking space down a little bit, right, then it's gonna have a curb cut there now that's gonna be more defined. And part of the problem with this whole area, it's like swimming with no curbs, right? So those curbs now all become more defined there, and it's clearly much shorter now to the corner, even though that is a really nice sign display on the corner. I think that'll help, yeah.
Yeah. Anything you can do to improve that, even like.
Yeah.
Me to suggest adding anything to make it look better and more visible. Pedestrians would be helpful. I just see somebody getting here.
Is there any conversation with DPS where that section of street stands with the streets and sidewalks plan? I mean, it definitely looks like it's older. Have they discussed paving plans in the future for Center Street, and how would that at all correlate with this in any way?
I don't know, they haven't checked in with me on that. So, I don't know what they have a whole series of, I doubt that Center Street and Water Street are on,
I
because,
apologize, I don't know the answer to that, but I know that they did not bring up any of this. Typically, it's not on this.
yeah, it's not,
It would have come up in
it's,
the conversation
yeah.
ahead. It doesn't look like it's the near term that they're doing.
it's in pretty good shape. Right, is in comparison to other streets. Yeah.
I have two quick questions. And I apologize for asking again, but could you just go back to the elevation and point out primary residential?
So, on the bottom left drawing, the door that you're seeing where Andy's cursor is, that's the primary, I'll call it the front entry for the residential unit. That tower would be part of the left side addition is all residential in use. So they would enter there and go up the stairs. If we go to the right bottom drawing, the door that you see next to the vertical lift, yeah, that would be the entry to the commercial space. So that's the primary. Then if we go, did you want to see the back one too?
Yeah, thank you. My only other question is if there additioning several heat pumps, where
Mechanical equipment would likely go on the back side of the property. If there were a back side, I would actually argue it's the gable end, closer to Leathery Street side, if you would argue, because that's, but it's also closer to another abutter. So that's very tight there. So whether it's on the, stair side that we've introduced, it's probably the better side to place.
I just have a couple comments. One, first thing is, I love this. I have these all over my desk. Great ideas come from sketches like this that eventually get done.
Andy was his idea.
Yeah.
I just implemented.
I like it. It's easy to change, right? The second thing, I'll agree with Charlie. I think breathing the life into this building was great. I mean, just cleaning it all up. I live around the corner and up the way, and I walk there a lot, and you just look at it, and it's just like, it's just tired. The road is uneven, and on weekends, that's true. Although I'm walking, there is some interesting entering on and off, and maybe that'll solve some of that. I'll also say the sidewalks are expensive. You know, we're doing that at our house, and per foot is just, so hopefully, you know, it doesn't all happen.
Hopefully he's under.
Yeah.
But we get it. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you know, if anybody watching the news tonight, you know, all the lumber is gonna go up 20%. So, you know, we'll see where that goes.
That's all.
open it up to comment. Comment? Okay. Close public comment. Direct the floor. I think we could use a little assistance from
I think the conditions that you said drafted here make sense. The clarification, I think, I would like to work with the chair after the board vote tonight. Just in terms of the wordsmithing, just because we're trying to capture a little bit beyond this, the shifting of the parking spaces. So I want to make sure that in that wordsmithing, we're capturing that, but in essence, as you're seeing, what Lisa had offered was two conditions, that we would basically be saying in the written decision. By the way, just as clarification, I know Rick had brought this up, but just for clarification for all the members, especially the newer members, there's a provision that was added to zoning a couple of years back that basically says that all the times that we're reviewing these special permits and such. We should be in variances, we should be looking at the board, should be looking at the sidewalk conditions of the property and requiring improvements. There's a couple of other caveats to that, the triggers being if it's an additional housing unit that's being added to the property or it's 50% units, involved in work. And so compared to the value of that property. So at the end of the day, the question here is essentially, is that the trigger and there's a full wholesale improvement of all that sidewalk versus the other improvements that essentially do not include the short, I should say, segment of brick here. That this segment right here might not be brick if that sidewalk provision isn't triggered. I think that's a reasonable way of approaching the conditions here for these improvements. I understand in concept what the board has been discussing here about the spaces, but I do think that requires a little wordsmith in the final written decision, but it would require and allow the applicant to shift from the plan that was submitted here. This curve, kind of a little further down, thereby allowing more space, Jamie was brought here for the entrance here. And then, of course, as noted in those conditions, all that sidewalk being upgraded to brick, except the sidewalk isn't triggered, change the second, city the city's obligations. So relatively straightforward.
Do we really need to have most of these options in here? Because
Sorry.
I was gonna say, let's just do 5, 6, 7, and 8, because if you have to do it, but it's part of our condition.
Yeah, this is part of the wordsmithing part. So first of all, I want to capture, separate from the language we have here and anything we might put the staff for, just the conditional language relative to shifting the space and just the fact that correspond here without the need for it coming back and to get here. We would obviously do office and public services, receive that revised plan, see it apply, then issue the applicant would have to come back here, but if it's you need for us to put this process here again. But to your point, to me, this would be relatively simple. And the condition they can say, in the event of, and then it shows that additional.
I was even just gonna say, you don't have to have any ifs in here.
Yeah.
You could just put in 5, 6, 7, and 8, because
Yeah.
if it happens.
Oh,
it
yeah.
Doesn't affect it anyway, it's something that can do anyway.
Yeah, I think what we're trying to just make clear, what is beneficial state here, though, is to clarify the minimum improvements that are still required, even if that provision isn't right. So.
So I'm saying,
Exactly.
No clause at all.
Right.
And I would also, maybe the vote should say about this offset of parking spaces. Jamie pointed out the 1 foot overhang of the railing. And then we need some space to get around it. So maybe we should just specify a number, whether it's
48
3 feet,
inches.
3 feet, I don't know, what would be the right number to get past that railing and get between the car and the. Would be 3 feet from the house?
The only area that I am not certain of is as it moves left, it's how much we have to move it back. Because of that diagonal line on the back property, that's the only thing that I just want to make sure we're comfortable. So I would say we could move down 2 feet comfortably if it has to be 3.
Two, yeah.
Yeah.
How much space do you have in the parking space is 9 feet wide? How much space is there for the car?
You need at least 1 foot for the railing, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the assumption is after that, there's at least 36 inches after that. So that would be the beginning and earliest of the space. I would, is it 4 feet?
I don't think it has to be that.
It doesn't have to be 36 because the car is before.
Right.
The cars doesn't go.
So that's what I'm saying, 36 inches from the wall.
Yeah, somewhere between 2 and 3 feet, I was
Yeah.
thinking.
Yeah.
Alright.
From the
Oh,
wall.
36 inches from the wall. I
Yes.
see, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a little easier to quantify.
But then it's clear what the plan's gonna show.
Another way for people to get in is to walk to the front of the car and back around. There's a way to do it.
But for somebody visiting a business.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Well, they're not gonna be parked.
No, but the car.
Oh, to get it there, I get you, right.
36 inches seems like a good target.
Yeah.
So the condition that was codified 36 inches off the building here, these the spaces here, so they shift. And And the better rear line. Yeah, yeah.
A number of
This is quite a.
Kind of briefly.
The tree commissioner in there, Megan, that's what
So, a brief synopsis is certainly adequate.
We could move to approve the DOD special permit, mixed use special permit for non-conforming in the ITIF special permit application submitted for 1 Center Street, with incorporating the draft findings that we reviewed tonight, as well as the conditions that we specified this evening.
Yeah, so, and also all that including the staff report as well as the modified conditions this evening to be included. Including the ship.
including the standing list.
And then, right, correct. And then all
And then they provide.
That motion.
Yes.
Okay, I have a second. All those in favor?
Thank you very much.
That's advanced skills.
Okay. Couple of general business items, approval of minutes. I submitted comments for March 5th, March 19th, is that anybody else? Ask for a motion to approve.
Can we separate motions? I can't vote on
Yeah,
One for the 5th of March and all of them.
So,
Good.
so I'll move to approve the 3/5/2025 minutes as amended.
second.
All those in favor?
And I'll abstain. 2 abstentions.
And all good for 3.
Move to approve the 3/19/2025 minutes. Amended.
Second. All those in favor? Okay. Any other update?
the only update I wanted to mention was that, I know we talked previously, and I mentioned this previously, but timeline is probably the most notable part, the FEMA maps. It's one of the changes that we're required by federal law to update, in 9 months, and so my hope would be based on the timelines involved, the available meetings, and their accuracies involved, sort of get this stuff done. Is in essence to use the same night that the planning board is meeting with the city council to hold the hearing on that piece as well. It's really largely driven by a requirement from the federal government so that everybody who has properties in factor zones can get flood insurance. So it's not necessarily a choice of it. We can say, well, we're not going to adopt those changes for the federal government. And that would be explained, I think, more so in the city council as we go to that discussion. But one of the things I wanted to do before we pushed out that amendment and into the city council packet and advertise for hearing at the planning board was to be able to display what that looks like to people, because obviously people don't want to see a comparison. There are different websites and platforms where the data is available, but it's a little confusing and they're not all perfect, although there's one that shows the sort of report kind of roll screen. What we're trying to do, I just want to show real brief, just so you can see what we're gonna provide to you and the city council is, this is not the, this is where it's gonna go. But this is my map, this is mapping page we typically use, I'm just starting really quick where it's gonna go, but in the layers tab, what you'll notice is that we have these called themes up here, and so the aerial imagery is the first thing you see. If you happen to be, you know, let's say we're in the downtown here, but you're sort of a waterfront area. When you're in there, you can choose if you wanted to go down this whole legend, but one of the things that you can skip right to, turns on and off layers, is zoning. And so one of the layers in there, that we can scroll down, yeah, floodplain data. So at any rate, what we're trying to do is to show the before and after, because so you can sort of see the year right of the zone that it's in. We can also turn off just for clutter. So we can now see this is the AE zone. Maybe, yeah, you can make it on the screen there, just that line. So this is where we see the distinction between these zones. We're gonna try to work at the label that display a little better. But this is showing the existing maps, and what we want to show is, so that someone can basically toggle on and off between the before and after. There's a page that, we've looked at or provided by the government program that, allows you to kind of scroll. I didn't pull up here first here, but yeah, it allows you to kind of drag a bar back and forth and see the before and after, which is nice. But unfortunately, what I found is the way that they have that page set up is they're not showing, when you do some of it, they're not showing all the before and after tiles. So it almost appears as if there's no flood data in the proposed for a certain area of that tile. So unless they're correcting that, I don't think it's a good tool for us to use because, without going to it, you'd understand better if I showed it. But at any rate, what we're trying to do is to make sure that as we're explaining the required FEMA maps, and FEMA has changed the delineation of where, you know, these hazard zones are, so that people can zoom in and see a given area or maybe the property, what is changing in the actual zoning or designation. You can essentially toggle on and off and see them before. It's not quite as you know, savvy or as smooth as a sort of scrolling bar that goes back and forth that was on another page, which we could send a link to as well. My only concern about that page was just to try to explain to people and having just a link sent out to you with the zoning amendment, being all text. The idea of looking at these maps and being confused by this federal page that's showing the tiles, but as you drag the bar across, some of the tiles are showing the before and after properly. Some of them, because the tile has not changed, they don't show the old tile in there properly, so it's confusing because so you might actually think there's no flood zone in that area. It doesn't make sense. So unless we're able to find a primary tool or something else like that that works better, my primary tool I think for us here locally is to show it properly on our maps here. That's we're going to use it for permitting. So the goal is to work with PC right now. Steve Lopez over there to transfer the data, extract it from FEMA, displayed on here properly. They're also talking to the communities about doing a similar thing. Each community might want a slightly different thing. I understand from him, but we're just looking to show basically the before and after. So what we want to do is have a theme here. When you go to the link that we're going to offer, it's the same as this My Map, you know, link page here, but it might go directly to that theme that says, you know, FEMA before and after, right? So you can really go right there, not have to worry about any other options there. What you might see in the legend here of layers is only those two layers essentially on and off to kind of see those, and then you can, you know, add other things you want. But that's in essence what I wanted to do before sending out the amendments. So it's not confusing to people, because the first question I'm going to get to people is what are the map changes? And as of right now, what we have posted is the PDFs of the FEMA maps, which are not quite so. It's just sort of toggling on and off the layer of the linear maps. So they're better maps than they used to be, but as PDFs, but they're still not as legible as looking at our own dynamic maps. So at any rate, that the sum result, I guess, is that talking about the counselors, about sponsorship, want to get into the next coming packet, the council's adjusted the dates on their dates for things. But then advertise and utilize the same date of the meeting on the signage amendment between the 7th of May to do that hearing, probably after the sign which you guys know that. But mainly to take advantage of the city council's time frame. I understand based on their schedule, budget cycle, everything else they have in their plate, it'd be difficult to get meetings. And so I do want to make sure that they cycle that through it. So that seems like the best timing. It wouldn't require us to use a meeting date necessarily, and certainly, you know, want to add any more process for anybody. So that
So is that May 7th?
That would be May 7th as well.
So you would have to have the map beforehand or something like that, so in terms of advertising, to show where the line is?
Yeah, correct. So actually the maps are already there's the PDF, they're referencing the tiles, those will be posted. The My Map page here is more for the display side of it. So for formalities, all of that will be there, referencing those tiles and those tiles, which are all, tile numbers. That will all be there, and that will all be posted clearly enough, as it is in the zoning today, actually. It's just that for illustrative purposes, it's not quite as convenient. So what I wanted to be able to do was push out, here's the amendment, and here's a convenient link to looking at the before and after on a web page, essentially, on a web page, rather than saying, here's a PDF of, if you want to see the befores and after. We have those posted on our website right now, and we just, show those. But it's not as convenient as just sort of, opening up two PDFs and then having to look back and forth. It's a little easier to just turn on later.
So here's another suggestion. I don't know if Steve can do this, but we did this in Portsmouth. We actually created, once we had those two layers, we created a polygon. It was just a.
Oh, yes, I did talk to Steve about that. There was a preference there, and then we had a conversation. We could circle back on that. There wasn't a initial preference for doing like a before and after comparison analysis. That he thought that was it is a bit more involved.
And the toggling is sometimes hard for people who remember, who have to stare at the point and say, what could go on?
Yeah, for instance, if you were on my map here, you went to print a page, print the page, with the before, print the page with the after, see the sentence. Yes, that's true, and I can talk to Steve about that a little more. He was a little bit concerned about the time processing involved. He felt that was a little bit involved, and my initial inclination based on the discussion, but we didn't feel it was necessary here to do that. Certainly that question might come up, and we might, we talk in that direction, but it seemed off balance. It was not worthwhile to do that here per se. The option there, if someone's looking for it, depending on what we get the discussion might be, all right, can we try to get a map that shows here's the red that goes from this to that? The problem is, there's gonna be color codings like that over the map because it's sort of like, is this A or B? Is it, I'm not saying, what something's gonna go to, but it might be a little bit of a mishmash in there too. So that's gonna create another layer that someone's looking at. So you got the existing, the proposed, and then the sort of comparison one. Mixed thoughts, I guess.
I think the thing that's most important, that's most of concern.
Yeah.
It's not whether you're going from one V zone to another V zone, one V zone to another, but if you're not in a flood zone.
Now you are.
That's
Yes, yes, yes. I'll talk to Steve again and see if there's, he's also looking at the data. We're extracting the data from FEMA, putting into our, area committee. We're not as committed, but concerned with the region that they do, but we have to focus on ours right now. So we're working with him. We can see what can be done about that, and we'll certainly try to do that. I just don't, it seemed like it might be a little more involved.
Yeah, the other way you could do it is you just go off the hand, you print out the map with both layers.
Right. And I don't know how many people will be interested individually. It probably is necessary with the city council to remind folks that, there's not a lot of latitude we would have because we'd effectively then get to say to our constituents.
It's probably not going to affect a lot of, probably a lot of parcels are partially in the flood zone now, will be more partially in the future.
Yes.
So it's not going to affect them legally, but it's those, going from the north side of Water Street to the south side.
Right, where you weren't in it at all. Yeah, I'll talk to Steve about that again, see, after he's got the raw data, he's been looking at it, there to the talk with this. Sort of, but, so I will see what we can do with it. And in that case, it might be sort of a third layer to show our sort of a map we can just put up the city, just kind of show the before and after, what has changed. Perhaps in the legend, just went to this went to that.
And the other advantage of that is that, well, one thing you can do is you can use the GIS to print out a list of parcels that are affecting change.
Yes, it's a little, I do want to look at rabbit hole for us to I think what comes out of that, how much more detail we're looking for, but well, how much of it? How many square feet, it can be a little of a rabbit hole for us to try to do that for every constituent or party might be interested in. So we can see what can be done. But it does become a little bit involved from the GIS analysis now and again and addressing under that. So I don't know, we'll see. And they certainly, areas like the mile and coastline, so, and then we also wanted to compare ourselves using the line map, I guess I don't own you. That shows that.
So Andy, what are we actually doing? We're approving, we're incorporating the map.
We're incorporating the updated FEMA maps. So all the map, like these boundaries that FEMA says are hazard zones of different types. We have.
So we're not analyzing the map for its accuracy, we're adopting it as what Newburyport uses.
Correct, correct.
Okay.
As essentially directed by the federal government, if people in our community are gonna get flood insurance, that's
So
basically.
we're basically replacing the data that happened in flood zone with the new data.
With the new,
Got it.
yeah, yeah, it's like taking the zoning boundaries, you know, old.
That
zoning
sounds
boundaries.
clearer.
So we should nominate someone to check every parcel.
Well, that's like.
Brian was volunteering. I think.
Oh.
Well, again, we'll see how much they may automate, it's just, it does become a little bit involved, and then there's sometimes end up being sort of like a, it's a rabbit hole, like how many other things that are wrong that are. Or other people that are confused and more questions are resolved, so it's just, it's a question of like simplicity and clarity versus, you know, all that other. But I'll send out links to those things. I'll even, you know, I include the link to the other one too, the front page. I wanted to include that caveat that part of the reason I don't want to rely on that for the illustration is a little confusing because when you drag it, it's not carrying the before and after tiles. That's because they didn't change anything on that tile, but they should still display the flood zones. And that concerns me because if I send people there, they're gonna think, oh, well, there's no, you know, and that's not really an accurate depiction of the before and after. So anyway, Diane and I were both a little bit, you know, concerned about, you know, using them for that reason, but at any rate,
So Andy, sorry,
yeah.
we can go on Newburyport My Map now, it'll have the most updated.
Right now, it has the current,
Not the
FEMA maps, the proposed ones, and what we'll send out a link saying, you know, here's where it gets ready. Is it should be on my map, it'll be in here as a layer, it'll probably say something
I
like.
mean, we can't access it right now.
Right now, you can access on the city's website, I'll show you right quick, only the PDFs. So if you go to public development, look at preliminary flood maps. So right now we have PDFs of those. The problem is when there's no change to them on the other page, they don't show them like. What we're doing is essentially taking, this is actually not a good one. Show an example of PDF. So this is the sort of old school, you know, black and white plan from FEMA. It's got a color coding at least showing where some of the zones are. But as you can see, displaying this on our map where someone can zoom in and out and see their own properties will be a lot easier for them than trying to, you know, compare where they fall in this, you know, map.
Yeah.
So before and after, just becomes easier to compare that. We're still required essentially to reference these specific maps. It's just that for illustrative purposes and all the, you know, day-to-day functions, we're relying on my map, the digital version of that to do it, but the federal government still relies on like these official maps. So in essence, all the tiles are still exactly and already there. I just want to make sure people can see it clearly enough and don't get overwhelmed and frustrated by the fact that the federal government's only giving, yeah, so.
They got a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah, well, when we actually started going through the federal government took down this webpage and that webpage is in the slide of the anyway, and that's coming along, and my goal again is to take advantage of that night so that both you and city council put up down to their meetings and stay on schedule and take advantage of the schedule, they do adjust the schedule if they're using this year.
Any of those maps
So we're currently
come back in 20?
Some of those maps, the tile dates that were effective, I think, are 2012, yeah, that was, I think it was the last time they updated, so that's it.
Any other comment? Yeah, I will entertain a motion for.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Jamie.
All those in favor? You?